Modern Freemasonry spread out from London 3 centuries ago. After only 10 years or so, this new club expanded to all continents. This mysterious, fascinating world seems rooted in an ancient tradition and remains aloof from the media. Freemasonry is said to exist everywhere in the world, yet no one has ever traveled around it. That's why I decided to go around the world in 80 lodges. I set off in search of its finest temples, its memory, its diversity. The aim of this long journey is to answer simple questions. What is Freemasonry today? Who are the world's Freemasons? What are they looking for? What are their beliefs? This journey begins with a short hop from London to Scotland. Scotland has had a considerable influence on the creation of English Freemasonry, for one simple reason. Scotland has always been able to preserve its traditions. This first stage is a trip through time. I went to one of the most famous lodges in the world, Mother Lodge of Scotland, number nothing. It's the local attraction of the village of Kilwinning. This is the Mother Lodge of Scotland, the lodge without a number, the oldest lodge in the world still in operation.
Originally from the Eglinton muniments to the Shaw statutes of 1599-1600 of William Shaw, the King's Master Mason, with numerous references to the Lodge of Kilwinning here being the ancient head and principal place. So this is surely the foremost, if not, as is claimed, the Mother Lodge.
The lodge has been installed since the 12th century in the abbey, of which only the ruins remain today. It was the first Mother Lodge masons who built this abbey. Sadly, a fire destroyed the lodge's ancient archives. The memory of its medieval origins has therefore been lost. Ian Doole, the worshipful master of the lodge, agrees to open the safe to show me their most precious possession.
So the most precious thing the Mother Lodge has being the early minute book, which starts in the year 1642. Many of the names here the brethren could not write, and the secretary would have written the name in the book in their behalf. However, the brethren have recorded their marks here against the name written by the brother secretary.
In the past, few masons knew how to read and write. The stone cutters of the Middle Ages would be given a specific mark for signing the stones they had cut in order to get their wages. These masons' marks are still used today for signing the attendance register. You even find these marks in the main street. The town decided to decorate their benches with the Mother Lodge's famous masons' marks. It's a special week for the Mother Lodge because she's getting a new worshipful master. The lodge has agreed by a vote that a camera can be a fly on the wall during the preparations for this change that will take place in 4 days. This is the first time in its history that the Mother Lodge has agreed in this way to show herself to the general public. It's the custom to have an official photograph taken of the person who will remain in the lodge's archives as the worshipful master of the Mother Lodge. On all the walls, time seems to stand still. The history of this lodge is the history of Scotland. She has received kings, princes, poets, victims. A small museum exhibits the objects that tell the story of previous generations.
This is a mallet which the Mother Lodge has in the museum. The head was made from the stone of King Solomon's quarry in Israel.
Everyone's busy and getting on with what he has to do. It's been like this for centuries without any order being given.
I'm doing it.
When I was a young boy, we were looking at one of the old yearbooks, and inside the old yearbook was all these lodges with Kilwinning after them. And I couldn't understand what this meant, the word Kilwinning, why was it there? And I got an opportunity to join this lodge, and it turned out to be a very prestigious lodge to join, the oldest one in the world. I'm in the privileged position of this weekend, hopefully becoming the Right Worshipful Master of this wonderful old lodge.
It's a very, very special day, and it's something you never ever forget.
Inside the lodge building, there's also a pub open every day for the inhabitants of Kilwinning, and also for the Masons.
And I think the sense of community is particularly strong in Scotland, especially in small towns, small rural towns, who have been industrial towns, who've had tough times and very hard living. And I think it's been important for families and friends to work together to maintain the community.
In 1807, the Mother Lodge agreed to join the Grand Lodge of Scotland. Before then, she had been independent and had dozens of other lodges under her authority. And one of them had amongst its ranks the world-famous Scottish poet, Robert Burns.
And he says, man's inhumanity to man makes countless thousands mourn. What a true statement that was at that time. And even today, we are still inhumane to our fellow man. And I think the beauty of Burns is that he can say in one or two lines, which many other authors and poets can't say in a whole page.
The day of installing the new master of the lodge has arrived. Preparations are in full swing.
Billy, get these chairs out of the way.
The guests are awaited. They're coming from all over Scotland and the whole world. Charles passes the time. He's unaware of what awaits him this evening. This is precisely what the Masons are protecting, the beauty of that which will be revealed for the first time. This is the reason why it's forbidden to film the ceremony, except for what goes on outside the lodge. This ceremony will last for several hours, and the participants wait for the procession to get into place. The fanfare reverberates all along Kilwinning's main street. The lodge's main office bearers follow on. They are then joined by other brothers. This procession is going to get the new worshipful master who is sheltering from the rain. Ian Doole is now the past master. The new master follows at the very back of the procession. In Kilwinning, Freemasonry is at the heart of the town. It's a tradition that binds a community together, where men are Masons from one generation to the next. Charles Hughes is going to enter for the first time at the helm of the Mother Lodge, with the heavy burden of continuing what others before him have begun. He has been elected for 2 years. It's a cycle that has been repeated for centuries, and this public procession is only found here at the Mother Lodge.
When we come through the door of the Mother Lodge, we're all equal.
I'm crossing the Atlantic for the United States. For New Hampshire, to be more precise. This is where the first European colonies settled 4 centuries ago.
I enjoy Portsmouth a lot. The history here is phenomenal. The best city in the world. That's tough to say. You have the shipyard right here, which has been around for a long, long time. Portsmouth is, I believe it's the third oldest city in the United States.
The first English colonies founded the city of Portsmouth in 1623. At the time, this region was called New England. It owes its prosperity to the importance of its naval shipyards. Masonry arrived here by sea by way of merchant travelers and soldiers. In the historic center of town is a very special inn. It's a Masonic tavern. On the first floor, there's a room equipped to hold Masonic meetings. This room dates back to 1766. Like all Masonic temples, the worshipful master presides over meetings from his seat in the east. The lodge has a secretary, and the brothers sit along the sides. This temple is still in use today. Masons passing through town would stop here where they could meet each other, get a meal, and find lodgings for the night. The first lodge of Portsmouth was founded in 1736, just 19 years after the creation of Freemasonry. It's called St. John's Lodge No. 1. The town grew. Masons would leave the little temple in the Pit Tavern to meet in private houses. In 1920, they would finally decide to become property owners. They would purchase this fine residence that they restored and redecorated.
We now approach the lodge room itself.
The lodge is neoclassical in style. An English flag graces the east, for the lodge was founded under the British Empire. The Star-Spangled Banner bears 13 stars, symbolizing the 13 states that declared America's independence 40 years after the lodge was founded.
Right away, you can feel the history in that building. You can feel the energy of the past in there. There's something about all the artifacts and everything there and all the people that have gone through that you can feel that positive energy through that whole building. I went there at an open house just to hang out with everybody. I felt welcome there before I was ever even a Mason.
2013, I was elected and installed as master for the year of 2014. To be a master of the oldest continuously operating lodge of Freemasons on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, that is a hell of an honor. I remember the day that I was installed as master, I had the biggest smile on my face I had in a long time. Once I realized that I have a lot still to learn, I think that's when it made more sense and I kind of calmed down from who I used to be. Ego is kind of important in my line of work. It's cooking. There's a lot of it. And dealing with different people's egos is definitely another thing. It's taken a long time to get to that point, but it's definitely helped tremendously.
Just like the lodge, St. John's Church in Portsmouth is also part of the heritage. George Washington had been there. This church has always had very close links with St. John's Lodge. Its ministers were worshipful masters. The little cemetery testifies to that.
Pope Clement XII that gave that papal bull saying all Catholics are forbidden to be Freemasons. That I never understood. Why? It didn't make any sense to me. I know a few Catholics at St. John's that, very similar stories to myself.
You have to believe in a supreme being. Now again, that supreme being is by your interpretation. But that book symbolizes that belief. You are taking that oath on that book. So I think that's why the book, just like in a courtroom, you swear on a Bible. To tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
When joining, I was asked that same question, and I had to be honest, and I told them, directly, that I personally don't necessarily feel that any certain Bible is right for me. The feeling is what matters to me, and the fact that I feel a connection to something greater that you know, for me, that's what I believe in. I honestly thought that I was going to say that, and they were going to be like, "Oh, hold on a second. Now let's think about this," and brush it off. But you know, it wasn't like that. It was okay, and they listened to me, and they understood what I was saying, and we went on.
Portsmouth was the gateway to Masonry in the United States, and St. John's Lodge tells the story of the birth of this nation. It still retains its friendly social spirit. This lodge gave its keys to the new generation, who will bring a new modern style. Philadelphia was the first capital of America. Its name in Greek means brotherly love. It was founded on the principle of freedom of religion. Opposite the town hall is the largest Masonic complex in the world. These are the general quarters of the oldest Grand Lodge in the United States, the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. America developed to become a great power from the 19th century onwards. American Freemasonry naturally embraced this expansion. This monumental architecture is the ostentatious expression of it.
That this organization attracted so many men who became giants in their societies. These great men who not only made themselves great, but by their membership in Freemasonry attracted great men to Freemasonry, and for that reason was a major factor in making Freemasonry great.
This grandiose architecture is typical of 19th century Masonry. These are images of another era when the greatest minds like Benjamin Franklin or George Washington wanted to be part of the fraternity. This enormous building seems strangely empty. The corridors of Philadelphia's Masonic complex are deserted. In 1980, the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania alone had 239,000 members. Today, scarcely 100,000. That's a drop of 60% in less than 40 years.
A major factor in the loss in membership is the sociological change of the societies in which we live. There was a day when there was a great deal of emphasis put on doing something for someone else. We've lost at least 2 generations of young men simply because the society is more self-centered than what we were at the time of our great numerical numbers within the craft.
This staggering fall in the number of Freemasons is widespread throughout the Western world. Its main consequences is the difficulty in preserving an architectural heritage. In New York, many temples from this time have been abandoned, turned into discotheques or concert halls, or are awaiting a buyer. The memory of men is also being erased. This is the case of the Masons who built the Philadelphia Freemasons' Hall. More than a century ago, they chose Mount Moriah Cemetery on the edge of town as their last resting place. This is not just any cemetery, it's the one in which veterans of the American Revolution lie. Today, this necropolis is itself buried under a jungle. For 40 years, these acres of brambles were a no-go area abandoned to crime and prostitution.
We're coming up in here to the Masonic section, I think.
This Masonic monument announces the entrance to the Circle of St. John. This is Mount Moriah's highest point. This section of the cemetery was reserved for Masons. This circle is beyond doubt the most imposing Masonic funeral monument in the world. This 30-foot column dominates the whole landscape. It took 10 years for these volunteers to clear just part of the graves.
It's a remarkable feeling to be here and discover something where you say, I know there's something in there, and then when you get in there, it's not just a headstone, but you find out it's a headstone of a prominent military officer who died in battle, or the headstone has magnificent artwork. What did this person do in life? Were they industrialists? Were they wealthy? Were they politicians? And that's part of the fun as well. Sometimes you can find it out instantly, especially now with a smartphone. You can just pull it out of your pocket and Google somebody's name. So that's that's an interesting point, an aspect of this whole project.
This urban jungle is just like modern towns. What we leave unattended for a moment disappears into oblivion. What is not useful fades away. Whether you're a veteran of independence or the founder of a city, it makes no difference. Today's world only holds on to what it thinks can serve it. American Masonry experienced its biggest numbers in terms of membership after the Second World War and up to the 1980s. Now this last generation has retired. These Masons of the Third Age continue their journey. Some have even decided to live together. I went to the Masonic village in Elizabethtown to meet them. This Masonic home was founded by the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania in 1910.
At that time, we had 85 residents. It was a vision for the future. Today, we have over 1,900 residents in this campus.
It's the largest Masonic village in Pennsylvania. It's the best possible place I could live, and they're always looking out for you. And they won't kick you out once they take you in.
The Masonic fraternity built this knowing that they were caring for people who couldn't afford to pay. And they wanted to provide the absolute best. Freemasonry, I think, tries to extend that all the time.
We're here together to further our life in Freemasonry and also to have the assurance that we are taken care of through later life, in which only the Masons here can assure us.
All possible services imaginable are available to the residents, including naturally a Masonic temple, designed to reflect a very modern style. This village is not unique. Demand is such that 4 other identical villages have been built in Pennsylvania. The profound changes in American society have greatly reduced the influence of Freemasonry. While individualism rules nowadays, altruism hasn't disappeared. Everyone has the freedom to be useful to society in the way that suits them best. The Shriners have been organizing generous collections of funds for a century. Some, as here in New York, dress up as clowns to entertain children and adults. Others organize shows. In this way, they fund 22 hospitals. The Order of Shriners exists in parallel with Freemasonry. This order is made up of 400,000 Masons who've decided to focus their Masonic undertakings not on themselves, but on behalf of society outside the temples. I set off for Georgia, one of the southern US states. I've come to meet a charity group, the Widow's Sons. Each Widow's Sons chapter is geographically connected with a state. This is the Georgia chapter, known as the Lion's Paw chapter.
When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't you ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die.
These Masons are tough guys with big hearts. Gary is their coordinator.
That I want to be on the positive side of humanity. To have people that I know, like these brothers here, that I can call upon at any time and they will be there.
Several years ago, they decided to adopt a little girl who was being affected by family difficulties.
We're covering the aspects of Masonry, and he plays a prison song.
We love prisoners too.
In the lodge, we do several fundraisers a year. We do 2 barbecues a year. We're raising funds for the Shriners Hospitals. We've got a fishing tournament coming up next weekend. We have bucketing we do where we stand on the street and just collect money from the unsuspecting public. Last year, our Shrine Center in Atlanta, we donated $1 million. We try to raise at least $1 million a year for them, which we succeeded many years in doing that.
These guys, they're my family. When I'm off,
from work or the lodge. This is what we do.
Will not be cursing or forgiven when I walk along some railroad track and find.
This generous action gives meaning to their undertaking and strengthens their Masonic bonds. In their own small way, they're making the world a better place. Ever since the start of this American stage, I hadn't come across any African American brothers.
Even when I'm asleep, ooh, I'm gonna let it shine.
Yet, there are a lot of them. I set off to find them in Atlanta in the Prince Hall Masonry.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I think that we as Masons, we have a responsibility. Be good men, be upright men. You know, be leaders in our community, be leaders in our family. You know, lead our children in the right direction, make sure that our family is good to go, you know, and provide relief to widows and orphans. I mean, it's all in what we practice. You have to practice what you preach.
This organization is 200 plus years old. Prince Hall Masonry is embedded. It's a part of the fabric in the African American community.
In 1778, Boston's Black Masons formed a lodge called African Lodge No. 1. In 1807, a Grand Lodge made up of African Americans was founded. It's called Prince Hall in tribute to one of its founders.
If you learn the history of Prince Hall, the man himself, in my opinion, he was the Drum Major of Peace. He was our first civil rights leaders for African Americans here in America.
This Prince Hall Grand Lodge, initially recognized by the other Grand Lodges, would soon be ignored by all existing masonries. After the abolition of slavery in the United States, the former Southern Confederate states would impose a regime of racial segregation. The brothers of Prince Hall would suffer this segregation simply because of the color of their skin.
Now I can be proud because I know the struggles that they went through. I know the trials and tribulations that they face. So now I can identify myself and be proud to be a Prince Hall Mason.
Shine on me, oh, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me.
It would have to wait until 1990 for the Grand Lodge of Washington to partly put an end to this situation. Partly because even today, the Grand Lodges of the 9 southern states perpetuate the separation between their lodges and the Prince Hall lodges.
What makes it so difficult, or what is the bridge burner that keeps us separate? Because there is a bridge that's getting burnt, but yet I think it's the acceptance of change. When you grew up in a certain generation in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you're stuck in a certain mindset to where the younger generation wants to accept that, but the older generation is keeping them from accepting it.
If you're truly practicing Freemasonry as you say you are, those barriers need to come down. It's happening up north already, and it's a beautiful thing. When I get an opportunity to travel up north and fellowship with my Caucasian brothers, my Puerto Rican brothers, my brothers of colors, it's a beautiful thing. But naturally, reality sets back into place when we come back home here in the South.
Today, the Prince Hall lodges play a fundamental role within the African American communities. More than ever, the issues of identity and emancipation of the individual are at the heart of this masonry. The Mount Pisgah Lodge, number 53 in Columbus, was founded in 1888. In the entrance hall, my eyes drawn to a photo propped up on the floor. It shows the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King speaking in the lodge's gala room. In order to understand his presence at the lodge, I went to the local Black History Museum.
This is a program in which we had observed Dr. Martin Luther King's coming to Columbus, July the 1st of the 1958.
In 1956, the leaders of the Columbus Civil Rights Movement had been assassinated. One of the Prince Hall brothers asked Dr. King to come to Columbus to revive the movement. He therefore decided to come in 1958, but no church would agree to welcome him for fear of reprisals and fires.
So John, the Grand Master, told him to open up the Prince Hall Masonic Temple. That's where he's going to speak.
All the people in this photo have gone, except for one whose legs you can see in the bottom left of the picture. That's Minnie. I was able to find her. She's 101 now and remembers everything about that evening at the lodge with Dr. King.
It was a calm meeting. Calm, very calm. He never did do nothing like want to fight and all like that. Most of it was peace. And that's what I want to bring in with the children, that we work together in peace and not shooting and all like that.
We are making any real progress in the struggle to make racial justice a reality in the United States of America.
This is her husband, the Mason, who was on top of the building.
To secure him, they had Masons placed on the roof, and the instructions was to shoot anybody down that's trying to come into this building.
In spite of the wounds and the humiliations of the past, the Brothers of Prince Hall have always shown willing. They marched for equality of rights and in law, and have been courageous when facing danger. Today's future will be better for them than for their fathers. There's a place where the word brotherhood means something. It's here, in Georgia.
I hope when I see it in my lifetime that here in Georgia, that most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia and the Grand Lodge of Georgia, our counterparts, can dwell together in unity. As we say with Psalms 133, behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. That's what I hope for.
I continue my journey in the direction of the state of Parana in southern Brazil. It's here that I'm seeking one of the most remarkable temples. It's isolated in the Pacific forest, a humid region that's very difficult to reach. Far from view in the midst of nature, here is the wall-less, roofless Masonic temple. It's open to nature, the sky, and the cosmos. This temple is open to every lodge in the world.
I wanted something different, something which represented all the Masonic lodges of the universe. I didn't want one single Masonry style, one aspect of Freemasonry. I wanted a pure Freemason style. And this temple is the result. This place represents the strength of Masonic lodges worldwide.
There is a second one. This is another temple, the first founded on the edge of this magnificent village of Antonina. This is a charming village with a wonderful, relaxed atmosphere. This temple is striking, difficult not to notice it in this neighborhood. This is Estrella Lodge No. 1, founded in 1869. It has all the traditional Masonic ornamentations you'd find anywhere in the world. However, what I will discover is surprising.
My father-in-law told me they paid. At that time, they knew some elders who emancipated, who granted freedom to the slaves that existed at the time when the lodge was founded. This lodge's mission was to help free the slaves.
They bought the slaves, and then they gave them their freedom. And in 1888, all the slaves were freed by an imperial decree.
Masonry was therefore founded here on the coast of Brazil by liberator Masons so they could buy slaves and give them their freedom. It's an oral tradition handed down in this lodge since its creation, but they can't prove their claims. So I'm setting off again for Buenos Aires. The archivist of the Grand Lodge of Argentina is known for his expertise. I ask him whether there is any evidence for this story.
This is a document which is very important in the history of the abolition of slavery. In 1855, the Grand Orient de France launched an international public opinion campaign for the abolition of slavery in Brazil. In Brazil, at that moment in time, there were many Masons who were in favor of slavery. From this moment onwards, there was a Republican social movement which sought to abolish slavery.
So the story of Antonina Lodge is true. Masons there gave slaves their freedom 19 years before slavery was abolished in Brazil in 1888. I'm on my way to find a third astonishing Brazilian temple, the Mountain Temple. It was built by a slightly eccentric Polish architect mason. This massive temple undoubtedly holds the most surprises, a real treat. First of all, there's a vast labyrinth under the temple, a complicated path strewn with esoteric symbols. There's another secret passageway that runs under the east up to the center of the temple. The altar is lit up once a year at every solstice by natural light passing through a little window. The summer solstice, the longest day of the year, has been celebrated by Freemasons and by the whole of humanity since the earliest times. There are 450,000 Masons in Brazil. That's nearly 10% of Masonry worldwide. The number of Masons has multiplied by 20 since 1945. This growth is remarkable despite the evangelical and Catholic churches that still reject Freemasonry.
Here in Brazil, Masonry is very closed, very traditional. People don't know what it is or how it functions. They're unfamiliar with it. The Brazilian Evangelical Church and its pastors are against it. It's banned. Until recently, the Catholic Church had banned it too. Masons were expelled from the church. I'm a shopkeeper. I just can't tell everyone I have anything to do with Masonry. I have to hold back. I can't say to many people that Masonry is a good thing.
Spiritualities play a huge role in this continent country. There's one for every taste. Many grand lodges exist alongside one another in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, or others that refuse to impose the belief in a creator principle.
The main issue relates to cultures that sometimes produce a different way of treating Masonry in relation to the question of universality. But universality, the principles underpinning Masonry, are identical in every country of the world.
Masonry arrived in South America via Argentina in Buenos Aires with the celebrated José de San Martín, the liberator Freemason who gave Argentina, Chile and Peru their independence from Spanish domination. Being a Freemason, San Martín was refused burial in the cathedral. No matter, the solution was to build his tomb outside the cathedral walls. But the public actually have to go through the cathedral to pay homage to him. Buenos Aires has numerous Masonic buildings. One of them is Lodge Hijos del Trabajo, number 74, founded in 1882.
Yo adivino el parpadeo de las luces que a lo lejos van marcando mi retorno. Son las mismas.
While the temple was being restored, a secret passage enabling occupants to flee in the event of danger was discovered.
Y aunque no quise el recuerdo, siempre se vuelve al primer amor.
I take advantage of this brief stopover to visit an old lodge, Unión del Pilar, number 127. This lodge was established in an unusual location, a shopping mall. Its temple was erected there. which was also founded at the end of the 19th century by European immigrants, like all the lodges in Argentina.
This is Hebrew and means abracadabra. This is the mother of life and death. This is the four elements, and the sun and the moon, and the phrase that...
Truth is the daughter of time.
After meetings, the brothers come together for a meal in the heart of this shopping centre once it's closed and is empty for the day. It's practical. There's a large car park, a restaurant and security. I'm setting off again further south, flying over Patagonia, then over the mountain range of the Andes as far as Tierra del Fuego. These imposing areas are barren and inhospitable. The Andes rise up here in a natural canal called Beagle in tribute to the ship that carried Charles Darwin. Beyond this canal is Cape Horn, then the Antarctic. Ushuaia is a deep water port that runs along the Beagle Channel. It's the world's southernmost town. Yet a century ago, this town didn't exist. There were only mountains and a prison, one of the most frightening in the world. No prisoner has ever been able to escape from this penal colony.
I was chosen by my brothers as the first Grand Master of the Lodge. Fin del Mundo, number 496.
When we first started, this lodge didn't have a meeting space. That's why we looked for a space. And due to its emblematic qualities, the old Ushuaia prison seemed like, well, an interesting place to establish our lodge.
This is where the infirmary was located. Many people died here. It's not an ideal place for a meeting devoted to the light. But this is what we had to work with. It's filled with plenty of things, many stories, and lots of energy. We don't know what energy that is. For me, an open acceptance of Freemasonry means accomplishing. In my particular case, my ancestors gave this to me. But above all else, it's about growing as a person. These belong to my grandfather. There is Freemason decorations. This is my grandfather, Fabian Onsari. I have a few of his decorations. And the rest belong to my father. His apprentice and companion aprons. They're made from quality lambskin. And his master apron. This legacy is important to me. My uncle gave me all this to remember my father by.
In their way, the Brothers of the End of the World Lodge are reviving the whole history of Freemasonry. After founding Argentina's youngest lodge in the prison, they undertook the construction of their own temple in a house away from the town. It is an ambitious project for the lodge's 21 brothers. They're financing this building themselves.
By having our own building, it makes things a lot easier. And this bond we feel is made a whole lot stronger. We can decorate it however we wish while respecting our tradition. I think it's a representation, a concept of the universe we live in, a representation of the human body and mankind. This doesn't mean that there's no religious feeling. It's a feeling of tradition, a feeling of understanding this universal architecture. It's a feeling of learning and harmony, a feeling of universal principles.
At this moment in time, I believe my time is running out. I'm at a loss for words. When you feel something this strongly, it's a wonderful thing. There are no words or phrases which could express what I am feeling.
Revelar la sensación que uno tiene.
The brothers from the end of the world are building their temple with few resources in a testing climate. It's the story of Masonic history so far. The creation of a lodge takes time. And here, it took 3 centuries for Freemasonry to become established in Ushuaia. I'm leaving the South Pole to return to Norway near the North Pole. This is the longest stage of this journey. The county of Finnmark is a region larger than Switzerland. In the depths of winter, the nights last 23 hours a day. Morten Virkola lives in Tromsø. We're going to travel together the last 560 kilometers that separate us from Hammerfest, the northernmost town in the world.
Today it's very nice, in fact. A little bit snow, no storm. For driving, it's very perfect weather.
The distances between towns are considerable, and some brothers, such as Morten, take a whole day to reach the lodge.
When I'm going to the lodge meeting in Hammerfest, I have about 8 to 9 hours. The Christmas meetings are always special. It's a very touching moment for me, and even talking about it, I get a little bit, I feel moved.
Hammerfest is the northernmost town in the world. It has always been an important port in the Arctic. There, opposite, is the North Pole. People have known about these Nordic lands since antiquity. The Greek geographers called it Ultima Thule, the edge of the world. Norway's youngest lodge was founded here some 20 years ago, and for that reason is known as Ultima Thule. Celebrating the Christian holiday of Christmas is an important event here. It's therefore an opportunity to redecorate the lodge's front door. This masonry is very special, for it has adopted a ritual found only here in Scandinavia. It's the Swedish Rite.
Norwegian Freemasonry comes from, of course, London, via Germany. The first lodge here was initiated in 1749 in Oslo. And today we are approximately 18,000 members of the Grand Lodge of Norway.
The top hat is a legacy from German Masonry. The Swedish Rite consists of a system with 10 degrees. Each brother bears the sash and the apron representing the degree he holds. This rite was invented in Stockholm in the 18th century. Sweden was at war against Denmark and France. The King of Sweden, Charles XIII, didn't want a Freemasonry identical to that of his rivals. He invented a Christian and Templar-based rite. Access to the lodge is therefore reserved only to Christians. How can the Grand Lodge of Norway reconcile its tradition in a globalized world?
I don't know the solution yet, but I can tell you that it is definitely a topic that is being spoken about, not only among our leaders, but also in the different lodges.
Jan Roger Fredriksson is in charge of coordinating rituals at Ultima Thule Lodge, and he works in office cleaning to support his family.
And always a little dirty, so you feel you're doing something useful. And the first apprentice, it was terrible. It was very, very a hard experience. It was tough. So I was shocked. I needed a long time to be able to look at these people again. So it was hard. It was a hard experience. I believe I needed some kind of coursing, and I read a lot of literature, but it told me nothing. It was like blah 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 in a way. It's what is this? So I put some energy in this project, and I understood there's got to be something. I was feeling I was put in a structure that brought to life virtues. They were not only words, but they were brought to existence, and we were, in a way, making them alive inside the lodge. It's putting you in a position where some strings attached to your spiritual life are touched, and something's happening. It's a path. Walking slowly, I think, but it's a path.
Everyone is focusing on the light during the dark time. It's a very dark blue sky, only very little light, but still it's the light that is amazing and fantastic.
The extreme climatic conditions, isolation, and long distances shape a particular relationship to life. This philosophy of existence is embodied by a people who have lived here for thousands of years. The Lapps, who are known locally as the Sami, their territory extends as far as Russia. The brothers of the Ultima Thule Lodge maintain very strong bonds with the Sami. The worshipful master in particular, who shares their nomadic life with them during the summer.
Sometimes you meet the bad weather. Even if in your life you will get in situations that you have to think about that you didn't have sun always. The weather is changing. So it is our life. We belongs to this earth. But most important is that you didn't give up. Even if you are living in the very badly situations, you have to remember you get sun one day.
The Ultima Thule brothers, isolated as they are, live an introspective, meditative, mystical kind of masonry. The ice-cold nights for 6 months of the year doesn't explain it all. This lodge is small, which is very rare in Norway. The lodges of the big towns generally number several hundred members. The Grand Lodge of Norway would like to open up to the world, but hasn't yet found a way, because fitting tradition with modernity is a very difficult task. France and its revolution invented the slogan liberty, equality, fraternity. Traditionally, there's a single Grand Lodge for each state. Here, more than 30 Grand Lodges coexist, and new ones are established every year, from spiritual to atheist masonry. it's impossible to paint a picture of them. That's why I chose to get away from the big towns and go to the Vosges in eastern France. The countryside there is magnificent. Freemasons live off this forest and work there.
I love forests. They're my passion. A forest is pure nature, and man is small. Cutting down a tree means nothing. You know, I'll never leave this place. The Vosges are our roots.
The town of Saint-Dié-des-Vosges is right in the heart of this countryside.
We have 3 successive lodges here which have gone through a lot. Les Amis Incorruptibles des Vosges, etc. We have a long history in this temple, which isn't necessarily any big secret.
The Lodge of Saint-Dié is remarkable and unknown to the general public. On its east side is a stained glass window that today has heritage status. It's the work of a famous French craftsman, Jacques Grubert. This lodge was dedicated to education, progress and work. It's a legacy of late 19th century French masonry, which campaigned at the time for greater social justice. Today, the Vosges region is having to deal with a difficult economic crisis and consequently political problems that are a bad sign for the future. The Masons feel very isolated and concerned.
I work to preserve a legacy for our children. That's my commitment. The legacy we leave behind, the state of the planet. It's worrying to see all this pollution. And this isn't a good legacy. I always feel guilty about this. This is my commitment to Freemasonry.
I earn a living through my work with the sheep. I shear the sheep's wool. Then, in the evenings, I'm wearing my sheepskin apron. Being able to meet people from all walks of life has given me a much wider view of the world outside of agriculture.
Knowledge is experience. It's what you learn every day. And this helps you in the lodge. As an apprentice mason, you mustn't talk for a set period. You listen. It's very rewarding. After, you realize that you've learned a lot from listening. You don't learn by talking. You learn by listening. You can't do your best work without incredible rigor. You need good foundations. If the cornerstone is solid, the building will be sturdy and well built as well. If the square is straight, this creates a building which will stand the test of time. Going to the lodge allows you to find strength, which can be then shared with the outside world. I see a lot of people. Many young people come here. I spend a lot of time with them. This allows me to question things and to think differently.
Society doesn't function in an egalitarian manner. It doesn't offer everyone the same opportunities. And Freemasonry rectifies this. And Freemasonry offers good-hearted men the chance to enter these lodges so they can perfect themselves and have every possible means to be able to work effectively.
Masonic tradition has retained these values of growth, altruism, and brotherhood. It's designed to be egalitarian, the bearer of the values of the secularized French Republic. To understand the considerable circumspection of Freemasonry in continental Europe, I'm traveling to Spain. Europe was ravaged by fascist dictatorships during the 20th century, and Spain experienced one of the longest, bloodiest military dictatorships under the leadership of General Franco. I go to Valencia. It's here that Freemasonry experienced its worst nightmare. This city was a Republican stronghold that suffered under the Francoist dictatorship. There are very few Spanish Freemasons, no more than 1,500 members. The graffiti on the facade of Valencia's little temple leave no room for doubt. The bronze doors of the Grand Lodge of Spain building in Madrid also bear traces of anti-Masonic feeling.
This is the door of the respectable Grand Lodge of Spain. A few months ago, the door was damaged. Nazi symbols were scrawled on it, and someone wrote, "Long live Franco."
The most brutal persecution took place on the coast of Valencia and Alicante.
When the war ended in Spain, the military barracks remained. It was here that soldiers practiced shooting. It was a shooting gallery, and someone came up with the idea of using it as a killing machine. 2,238 people have been murdered here since 1939. For the traditional Spanish right, Freemasons were considered worse enemies than the communists and socialists, because the church was, well, and still is, very powerful in Spain. And Freemasonry is considered by the church as its personal enemy. The problem is that in the case of Freemasons, we don't even have their names. No records were kept. So it's impossible to determine whether 2,000 or 4,000 Masons were killed. And here, 11 people who were shot, simply for celebrating Hitler having taken Paris. It's an example of the extreme inhumanity of those who ran Spain at that time.
In Valencia, two lodges share the same building. On the left, the symbolic Lodge of Spain, which is mixed, and on the right, the traditional Grand Lodge of Spain, which is reserved exclusively for men. The symbolic Lodge of Spain welcomes brothers and sisters. It was founded by Masons who had fled the dictatorship by going into exile in Mexico. Mixed Masonry exists throughout Europe.
But there is still a cloak of silence over the repression experienced by the Freemasons. There were only 8,000 of us in Spain, and 80,000 people were caught up in the anti-Masonic repression. In other words, 10 times more. When we talk about Francoist repression, it's more difficult to understand what the Freemasons went through. That's why I think it's very important to remember those who died defending freedom and equality between human beings.
I remember everything my grandfather taught me, since I studied at the University of Granada. He'd been sent down from there, expelled, because he'd been convicted of being a Mason. At that time, I realized that he'd brought me up according to his Masonic principles, and I remember that every time I come here.
In 1941, my grandfather received a telegram from the Court of Repression against Masonry and communism, summoning him. They had discovered he was a Mason, which was true, and so he was sentenced to 21 years in prison.
It was a shameful, inhumane, evil persecution, because the Masonry that existed in Spain had a huge moral and very humanist dimension.
Perez Garcia Furio was a great mathematician, a university professor whose destiny was shattered. In order to appreciate the extent of the anti-Masonic repression in Spain, I go to Salamanca, to Franco's Eagle's Nest, where his headquarters and intelligence services were installed. It's here that tens of thousands of files on all the Spanish Freemasons he persecuted are still held. I ask Maria José Turion Garcia to find the file of Pérez Garcia Furio.
Here it is. We have the symbolic name, Pythagoras. The lodge to which it belongs, it is said that it belongs to the region of the East in Numancia, in the city of Alicante and Valencia. The repression was carried out against Freemasons and against the members of Freemasonry, and took shape in several aspects, beginning with physical repression. And they tried by the Court of Repression of Freemasonry and Communism, by military councils, courts of political responsibilities. The physical elimination also happens, a repression, most under imprisonment of 12 years for belonging to Freemasonry, depending on the degree of implication of the organization chart in the order.
Franco took this obsession so far as to have a Masonic temple built right inside his intelligence service. This representation of the Masonic temple is a thing of fantasy. It's designed to make a negative impression on visitors and the population. To find an old Spanish Masonic temple, I need to go to Tenerife in the Canary Islands. For the entire remarkable heritage was destroyed in Spain except on this island. In the capital, Santa Cruz, the first building taken during Franco's military push wasn't the town hall or Tenerife's municipal council, it was the Masonic temple situated on the Calle San Lucas.
The first thing that Franco and his Francoist troops did was to enter the temple and murder a brother who was in charge of maintenance.
This temple, which miraculously survived, is classified as European heritage. This building is unique, above all due to its proportions, which observe the geometric rules of the golden ratio in the most minute detail. Under the temple, there's a tunnel dug into the rock of the volcano, and which, in the original sense of the word, enables one to withdraw to the center of the earth. The architect, José Miguel Márquez Zarate, is responsible for its restoration, an old, difficult, and expensive project.
For me, this building has been like a girlfriend I have to win over and make love me. And in the end, it was the opposite, because I was the one who fell in love. It's given me all the answers to the questions I wondered about. I don't think I can explain in this interview everything that this building has given me, professionally and personally.
It will be restored to its original state. It will become a museum of Freemasonry, as well as a meeting place for the different schools of philosophy that promise to provide society with a school of freedom, tolerance, and liberty. A school that defends the values that Masonry has defended on Tenerife.
This Masonic temple is unique evidence of an old masonry on an island at the crossroads of the sea routes between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Tenerife, it's an island open to travelers from the whole world and to all cultures. An island that, thanks to this temple, is rediscovering the spirit of its founders. Ukraine is one of the youngest democracies in the world. It's been sovereign since 1991. It was at Odessa, on the shore of the Black Sea and facing the Crimea, that I broke my journey. The Grand Lodge of Ukraine holds its annual meeting in a private building. This is the first time that the young Grand Lodge of Ukraine has agreed to show itself openly. These Masons are running a risk by being filmed.
At the moment, we have 15 lodges in Ukraine, so the quantity of brothers are around 300 brothers.
To get a Grand Lodge back on its feet in a former Soviet country is no easy thing. Mindsets change slowly and are still under the influence of an Orthodox church openly opposed to Freemasonry.
Freemasonry in Ukraine can really help this country to succeed. For our state, it's very important, and I do believe that a lot of young people who will keep improving themselves, being a right person, do the right things, being moral, and that will help us to succeed, because really we need that. And only young generation can make it.
Odessa is part of the free world. The streets are lined with white acacias from Italy. They were paved with lava stones from Vesuvius. Odessa was built by the Italians, the English, the tramways by the Belgians, the opera house by the Austrians, and the ship owners were Greek. After their annual meeting, the brothers gather in a restaurant.
Ukrainian Freemasonry is distinct from other Masonic practices, such as those in Russia and Turkey, because we are motivated by a goal. This goal is linked to the fact that we are developing a democratic process, as well as a return to Europe. And the young people linked to our movement want Ukraine to become a member of Europe. This is why we can say Ukrainian Masonry is more courageous. It chooses independence and legitimacy.
Odessa was, from its foundation, a Porto Franco, free city. And it was founded by Frank Masons, by free people. So free people founded free city. So among the main founders of Odessa was José de Ribas, Duke de Richelieu, Langeron, and de Volan. All of them were Masons.
At the same time, United States were founded, and for some people who were free, open-minded, they would like to build a new world, free world for everybody, without no borders. Then for sure the history is tough, the history is complicated. Due to all these periods, this territory suffered from different wars, whatever. We have a pause of Freemasonry for almost 80 years.
The history of Ukrainian Freemasonry is extremely dramatic. Many Masons were just killed.
Between 1932 and 1933, Soviet policy killed several million Ukrainians. The international community today accepts the term genocide.
For us in Ukraine, there is a long history of Masons being persecuted and executed. And this history inevitably has consequences on the way our brothers think.
We are on the battlefield. We have very broad border with old world, and it's extremely aggressive. You cannot imagine that in 21st century, after the mankind made much more smart after these tragedies in the World War I, World War II, stop. No matter which religion you have, no matter we are equal, that is, you are free to do that. Don't fight with each other because of religion. With no matter which skin of color, which nation we have, our Britons with France, Ukrainians with Tatars, endless this nightmare, this war.
The young Longeron Lodge of Odessa has its own temple. Its address is kept secret.
I consider the temple to be more of an inner temple. Each person tries to create a state of perfection for themselves. And what we do is meditate on how to enter into this state. And without this condition, it is not possible to work on yourself. So you can only be a true Mason once you reach this inner state, which allows you to enter this temple. Only then can this temple have its effect on our souls.
The artist Skoptsov Konstantin creates the Longeron Lodge's Masonic aprons. This painter keeps alive the ancient relationship between the arts and Freemasonry.
For me, freedom is the greatest torture. With this painting, I've tried to depict the fact that freedom is the greatest gift God has given to man. Yet at the same time, it is also the greatest torture. The fire found within mankind can both shine bright and burn. The flames can both rise and die out. What is it within humanity which determines if the fire is good or bad? Only one instrument within mankind can ever hope to determine this. It's the human heart that determines this fire.
Material things and material world, it's not everything in the life, you know? And such spiritual things as crafting together, when each brother, each person putting part of his soul into the craft, and no matter where it is, because when each brother really works together in a chain, it doesn't matter really, it doesn't matter.
The attachment to our land is the attachment to the mother who nourishes us and gives us a language. Freemasonry is alive, powerful, precisely where freedom is just within reach. It only has meaning where men need courage to defend a still fragile freedom. My journey takes me next to Africa, south of the Sahara. The Republic of Mali is a vast region, 3 times larger than Germany or Japan. In this landscape, the baobab perfectly symbolizes the harmonious coexistence between beliefs and communities. The sacred tree is rooted in the soil of an ancient civilization. Islam is the majority religion. It coexists with the Catholic, Protestant, and animist minorities.
The first lodge in Mali is called the Respectable Lodge Acacia de Joliba, number 1.
Freemasonry here is very unobtrusive and unknown to most of the population.
One of the main problems in today's world is ignorance. This is what we must address. People must understand that Freemasonry is not a religion. It does not conflict with religion. And that the values held by Freemasonry, they can only be seen as positives. I am a monotheist, a Muslim, and these values strengthen my faith.
The River Niger, known locally as Joliba, the River of Blood, is one of the biggest rivers in the world. Blood carries life, and this blood is the same for everyone. This river is therefore a vehicle for tolerance.
The arrival of Freemasonry in Africa came about more naturally and favorably than anywhere else. In other words, the institution was made for this continent, according to its traditions.
The capital, Bamako, sits on the banks of the river. The National Grand Lodge of Mali meets inconspicuously in a little temple located at a distance from the center in a popular district.
We have Christians among our members, as well as Muslims, and even Jews. They can always work with us within this lodge. The proof of this is that today we have the Bible and the Quran here. as well as the square encompasses the three great lights.
I'm a practicing Catholic. It might be a little odd since this is a Muslim-majority country. And I work for my lodge just as the others do. There is no greater example of tolerance and fraternity.
For the first time since the start of my journey, I'm traveling under high levels of protection. Since its independence, Mali has been struggling to maintain its national unity. The fight for democracy is not over. Here, like elsewhere in the world, ISIS terrorists are trying to sow hate and terror. This evening, a party is being held in honor of the new Grand Master of the National Grand Lodge of Mali. The location of the party is kept secret until the last minute, and the security forces are there in numbers to protect this meeting.
Stand, my brothers. The worshipful Grand Master is here. The worshipful Brother Boubacar Keïta.
The election of a Grand Master at the helm of a Grand Lodge is often an opportunity to welcome representatives from foreign Grand Lodges and to organize a gala evening.
My brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, let us make our first official toast to the President of the Republic of Mali.
I'm Catholic, and I saw that I had not discovered everything I was looking for in life. For this reason, I chose to undergo initiation. I wanted a spiritual evolution. For me, Freemasonry complements my culture.
Hello, my brother.
How are you?
Very well.
And how's the family?
Yeah, very well.
All good?
All good.
And your day?
Good.
It's going well?
Very well. In truth, Freemasonry is a particular moral system. We strive to teach it through symbols. We teach adherents how to live alongside others. We teach them to be tolerant, community-minded, and humble. These are the qualities we need in the world today in order to live in peace, in order to safeguard and strengthen our shared world. My religion is Islam, and this is what they teach us. It's just taught by other means.
We must accept people for what they are. We must forgive others because we must love one another.
Since the 14th century, we have spread the values of humanism, the values of solidarity and societal virtues. From Timbuktu to the lands of the Dogon, there is a platform which precisely intersects with the values held by Freemasonry.
If I present myself as a Mason, I say I am a Mason's son. I belong to the National Grand Lodge, and I am of the Dogon people. This object represents the doors to a granary. Among the Dogon people, this symbolizes the entirety of the world. On both sides of the object, there are symbols describing the round earth covered by water. Inside, There are symbols depicting the creation of man and the existence of death. I often tell my brothers that my life as a Freemason is inspired by my Dogon heritage. Coming closer together allows us to know one another and to know where we're going by opening a door. Who am I? When did I see the light? This is important.
Malian culture and traditions form an intangible treasure that is shared with generosity. The symbolic teaching of Freemasonry is not learned from literature or the internet. The Lodge only sanctions the sharing of respectful, peaceful human relationships. This is what is called living together. My journey east continues. I set off for the Near East and to Jerusalem in Israel. This is where Judaism, then Christianity, the world's two major monotheistic religions, were born. In Israel, the lodges bring together Christians, Muslims and Jews. They're proud to stress the universality of all creeds in their lodges. These three religions share the same tradition and all claim to be children of Abraham. They share the same principle of the creation of the world.
בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. והארץ הייתה תוהו
وكانت الأرض خربة وخالية.
Now the earth was unformed and void.
وعلى وجه الغمر ظلمة.
And darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
The battle between light and darkness continues. Today, the children of Abraham fight over Jerusalem. All these communities, however close, coexist with difficulty. According to the Torah, the first temple was built by King Solomon 3,000 years ago.
The origins of Freemasonry start with the Temple of Solomon.
What we did with Solomon's temple, which was physical, was taking the ideas of a temple for present-day Masons. It doesn't really matter which temple it is. We look at Solomon's temple as a symbol of a temple, of the strive for perfection or for becoming better, for morality, everything, the deeper meaning of life.
Solomon's temple was destroyed, then rebuilt by Herod. It was this second temple that facilitated the spiritual emergence of Judaism. On the south side are three doors that were bricked up by the Romans. This is the entrance to the temple. The Masonic temple is a symbolic reproduction of the temple that was destroyed, Solomon's temple. We can find numerous references there, such as the two columns erected at the entrance to the vestibule. On this mosaic, we can recognize the north entrance to Jerusalem. It's the Gate of Damascus, where we find a little-known curiosity, Zedekiah's Cave, also known as King Solomon's Quarries. Masonic meetings have been held in these quarries since the 19th century. Generations of builders have cut this rock. It took centuries for Jerusalem and, so it goes, Solomon's temple to emerge from this cave. It's said in Jerusalem that it all began here. Many graffiti testify to the passion of Freemasons the world over for this highly symbolic place.
Last year, we held 3 meetings in King Solomon's Quarries. So, Jerusalem has always been a point of interest for all the Freemasons who are visiting Israel.
The Grand Lodge of the State of Israel has its headquarters in Tel Aviv.
In Israel, we have around 50 active lodges. These lodges operate in 8 different languages. This is the seal of the Grand Lodge of Israel. It features the Masonic symbols of the square and compasses. And within the seal, there is the Christian cross, the crescent moon of Islam, and the Star of David. So you see, this shows that through Freemasonry, we unite all Freemasons together, no matter what religion they follow outside of the temple.
Further north, the town of Haifa is Israel's largest port. The Arab town of Accra is situated on Haifa Bay. This town is a concentrate of the history of this land. It was Byzantine, then conquered by the Arabs, then the seat of Christian kingdoms and their Knights Templar, of the occupation of the Ottomans, and finally of the British Mandate. The town of Haifa has been able to retain its peaceful character. Freemasonry there is ancient and respected.
That's my father. And the worshipful master that year, he is a Muslim. We are in an island in a very rough ocean. So we have to maintain it as is, to be in a shelter in the body of the lodge, because otherwise we would be totally strangers at the body of the lodge, and because of that we feel in a harmony and a very good relationship, and we feel as exactly as brother as can be. That's what we are.
Reuven Lodge bears the number 1. It was created in 1928, then joined the Grand Lodge of Scotland in 1931. Reuven Lodge number 1 has retained the customs of Scottish Freemasonry, as can be recognized by the green aprons.
It's a lodge with a lot of heritage in it, a lot of formality, a lot of drama in it. When I mean drama is mostly the way people react to the symbols, to the symbolism, to the rituals itself. They want it to be perfect the way it should have been. I wasn't looking for light because I never thought I was in darkness prior to my initiation. But I think that looking for light is the ability to accept the inevitable changes in life without the cynical aspects, without trying to object too much. I think what light is to me is taking it as it is. And I think this is another part of Freemasonry, the ability to look directly and see what's in front of you. That's the light. That's what I see.
So, there is an ancient Freemasonry in the Near East. Since the 1950s and the rise of nationalism, the lodges have disappeared from Egypt, Iraq, Iran, and Syria. In Israel, the lodges have survived. In any event, they make it possible to bring together men who would otherwise be strangers in their own country. I've set off again further east, heading for a place between the Middle and Far East, India, the country of 1,000 gods, the country of Maharajas, the country of Kipling, the country of Gandhi. It's inhabited by ancient civilizations, and you meet spirituality everywhere you turn. My first stage takes me to Bengal, which for centuries was a center of trade, a place where industry prospered. The English East India Company took control of this area in 1765. It was the start of British colonial domination. As a result, it was at Calcutta that the first headquarters of the Grand Lodge of England were set up. Freemasonry arrived in Calcutta in 1728, 10 years after its creation in London, again in a port, in a city whose brilliance was that of trade between East and West.
And in those days, the lodges were mostly traveling lodges. In other words, they used to travel wherever the ship went, if it was a naval lodge, or if it was a regimental lodge, wherever the regiment went, it used to travel with that.
The English considered India the jewel in their empire. They brought Freemasonry with them in their luggage. It has had a number of roles: charitable, social, and that of assisting English, Scottish and Irish travelling Freemasons who went all over this empire. English Freemasonry, having come into contact with India, was going to have to change. In 1843, a new lodge was founded by 4 Indians, and one was Parsi. Parsism is a religion derived from Zoroastrianism. It's one of the most ancient religions in the world, dating back to the Persian Empire. Parsis worship fire, the symbol of divine light. There are only a few tens of thousands of them throughout the world.
That is the armor or the shield, what we believe in Zoroastrianism. We have got good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. This is the basic religion of the Zoroastrians. The tenets of the religion. Okay. And belief in one God, one Almighty. That's
Hindus, though broadly in the majority of India, have long been forbidden to enter a lodge. They in turn wanted to join Freemasonry. In Calcutta in 1872, a man called Prasanna Kumar Dutt was the first Hindu ever initiated.
After that, gradually, then there was influx of Indians, But it took quite some time and a lot of effort, a lot of persuasion for an Indian to get into Masonry then.
The Grand Lodge of India was formed in 1961. Out of 277 English, Scottish and Irish lodges in India, 145 would join the new Grand Lodge of India. So in India, there are not 1 or 2 or 3, but 5 books considered sacred in the lodge.
One is the Holy Bible, one is the Bhagavad Gita for the Hindus, Quran for the Muslims, and we have the Zenda Vesta for the Zoroastrians, and we have the Guru Granth Sahib for the Sikhs. So it's a free will of the candidate to choose whichever volume of sacred law which he wishes to take his obligation on, which makes it more binding on him. So we are here not to impose a particular religion or a religious thought.
India, with so much of diversity, with so much of heritage of every other culture that we see, we have a sense of equal respect that we tend to give to almost all the cultures.
The person who best expresses the spirit of Indian Masonry is the famous Freemason Rudyard Kipling. He was initiated at the age of 20 in the Punjab. He wrote the poem The Mother Lodge.
There was Rundle, station master, and Beasley of the rail, and Ackman, commissariat, and Donkin of the jail, and Blake, conductor sergeant. Our master twice was he, with him that kept the Europe shop, old Framji Edulji. Outside, sergeant, sir, salute, salam. Inside, brother, and it doesn't do no harm. We met upon the level and we parted on the square, and I was junior deacon in my mother lodge out there.
India being a huge country, the Grand Lodge of India is divided into 4 regions, each with a regional Grand Master. This building houses the administration for the Eastern region, which represents some 100 lodges. But above all, there are Masonic temples, each of which is the bearer of a history, tradition, and heritage. It's the weekend, and a number of events are being organized. The National Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of India, Harcharan Singh Ranauta, arrived in Calcutta to open the little clinic that has just been modernized. 2 new lodges will also be officially installed, and it's obligatory for him to be present.
Today,
Grand Lodge of India, to my mind, is one of the fastest growing Grand Lodges in the world. In last 3 years, we have had a growth of 15%. We feel that 30% of people in India are educated people. And to my mind, India can become one of the largest Grand Lodges in the world. We just have to work on the right direction, that's all.
Harcharan Singh Ranauta, our most worshipful, the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of India, is the first Sikh Grand Master of India in India's history.
The presence of a Sikh Grand Master at the helm of the Grand Lodge of India is no coincidence. To understand that, I first went to Chandigarh in the north on the border with Pakistan. Chandigarh is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, designed by the French architect Le Corbusier. We're in the heart of the Punjab, the land of Sikhism. Sikhism is a spiritual and pragmatic teaching founded in northern India in the 15th century. It's the youngest spirituality in the world. Not far from Chandigarh is the holy city of Amritsar, the spiritual center of Sikhism.
When Sikhism started, the community was divided by castes. And males would dominate over females. And all these things were, like our gurus, they made sure that the disciples of this faith, they believe in equality, they believe in community service.
The world-famous Golden Temple is the holy place of Sikhism. This is the first time that a camera has been permitted to film it. Here is where the sacred book of the Sikhs is kept. These scriptures, read continuously, are a compilation of all the teachings of the 10 gurus of Sikhism.
There should be no caste system, and you should be good, you should be better than what you were.
I think the principles of Freemasonry and Sikhism are very similar. That is why more and more Sikhs want to join Freemasonry, probably in Punjab.
Freemasonry is very old in Amritsar. Lodge Universal Brotherhood No. 100 was founded in 1932. Today, Lodge Brotherhood No. 100, having moved a great many times, is installed in a small house on the edge of town.
Since I'm 22 right now, I've graduated and I was very curious on becoming a member in the lodge. So right now I'm an apprentice Mason and I've completed my first degree. I think there's not much difference by coming to this place in Freemasonry, the lodge, or going to the temple. In both the places, you come here with zero knowledge. And you listen to people, you listen to the rituals, you listen to what all they have to tell you. And then, being a rational person, you grasp the things which you feel are realistic enough to make you a better person. So I think in that way, there's not much difference between, and as it is already said that Freemasonry is not a religion. And being an agnostic, I think I'm an agnostic, and being an agnostic, for me, again, Sikhism is not religion, but Sikhism for me is a way of living my life.
Serving the community and participating in the development of one's country, the aim is clear. The challenges in terms of combating poverty are considerable. The Grand Lodge of India clearly devotes itself to the aim of serving this cause. Chandigarh's Lodge Mount Shivalik is a good example of this charitable priority. Here the lodge has opened an eye clinic on the ground floor of its building. And it's the same throughout India, to provide medicine, education and aid to the poorest members of society. There are children's schools and also special education schools.
You know, in every human society, and Freemasonry is part of the human society, charity has been a basic value.
In Ludhiana, the little Vishwakarma Lodge has increased the number of charitable projects. They decided to produce and supply tailor-made prostheses free of charge. Then they opened a dental clinic. And finally, they came up with an astonishing initiative to open a creche for the children of women prisoners right inside a prison. It's forbidden to film inside this prison, but I was able to use my mobile phone. This creche provides decent childcare for babies locked up with their mothers. India has many Masonic treasures, such as the Masonic Temple of Patiala. This temple is certainly imposing, and its history is just as impressive.
This lodge, when it was founded in 1916, we got the warrant from the Royal Lodge of England. He is late Maharaja, Lieutenant General Maharaja Bhupender Singh, Maharaja Dhiraj, Maharaja of Patiala, who founded this lodge in 1916, exactly 100 years ago.
After founding and building this temple in 1916, the Maharaja Bhupinder Singh went into battle with his own army in the First World War in France and Belgium.
He was my principal, school principal. He was a German Jew. But during the Second World War, when Hitler got after Jews, their father was killed. But he joined the Royal Army and he fought against the Germans.
I leave the Punjab, heading for southern India and the city of Hyderabad, situated on the border between North India and South India. Hyderabad is the capital of the state of Telangana, for centuries known for peaceful coexistence between Hindus and Muslims. Freemasonry arrived here in the mid-19th century. The lodges met together at random in private or rented rooms. During the 1930s, the Freemasons made a request to the monarch that they might have buildings of their own. Then the Freemasons organized themselves and made an official request to the king for a building. The monarch, Mir Osman Ali Khan, who bore the title of Nizam, was the descendant of a dynasty that arose after the Mongol occupation. This Muslim king was at the time one of the richest men on the planet. He responded favorably to the request and provided one of his palaces. What he provided was not just any old building, it was a sumptuous palace constructed in the 17th century. The lodge renovated it, adapted it to its needs, and then the king came in person to inaugurate it. This palace, which in former times was surrounded by nature, is today enclosed within the city, but it has lost none of its great presence. The name of the palace is inscribed on the facade. It is called Goshamal Baradari.
Here we had a building where people from every walk of life came in. So the building had that kind of vocabulary that could absorb or welcome all kind of people. This was a very interesting way in which our Freemasons restored this building.
India's culture is abundant in wealth, its architecture, its music, and its languages too. Several hundred languages are recorded in India. 22 of them are officially recognized. This lodge is the only place in the world where members speak one particular language, Urdu. This is the only lodge where this language is spoken.
This lodge is unique in the world because it is the only lodge in the world which works in Urdu language. Urdu is an Indian language. Although it has got a flavor of some foreign languages, but it has assimilated the culture of India, the languages of India, and it is an amalgamation of different Indian and foreign languages. This language has got its own beauty, it is flowery, it has got its own taste, and then its elegance and expression.
Moving abruptly from a lodge whose temple dates from the 17th century to the Indian Silicon Valley, that's the India of today. India is a young country. Its population will soon exceed the population of China. It has the largest population of students, engineers, doctors and programmers in the world. These days, its IT engineers work for a globalized, interconnected world. Can Masonry adapt to this technological revolution?
We work in IT. IT is like 24/7 job. It's very difficult to, meet people.
We are a traveling lodge. Our constitution allows us to meet within the radius of this beautiful city of Hyderabad.
The only time I find for myself is Sunday, not even the 5-day week. I work all 6 days. It's a blessing because Daylight Lodge meets in the morning on a Sunday.
This is one of a kind of a lodge, I could say, here in India, as far as I know, wherein we live out of a suitcase, we craft out of a suitcase. So that is the spirit of this lodge.
Everything requires interaction. So that keeps getting increased manifold levels, which actually results in the brethren getting stronger in their bond.
Sometimes in the brotherhood, I have found people who are working for the same organization, but I have never seen them. And after coming to this lodge, I found them closer than even my colleagues.
India has set its economic, social and democratic pace of development. Thanks to training and education, a large, inquisitive middle class has emerged. India has brought to Freemasonry a unique openness, a world momentum that is inspirational. It's in the process of creating a privileged place for young people and for women as far as the very near future is concerned. My trip around the world is coming to an end, but nevertheless, I have one last stage on this journey. On the 16th of July 1969, Apollo 11 took off carrying a crew consisting of Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins and brother Buzz Aldrin. Four days later, on 20th of July 1969, Apollo 11 landed at the site of the Sea of Tranquility. Neil Armstrong was the first to emerge from the lunar module and place his foot on the soil of the moon. He was followed by brother Buzz Aldrin. He in turn walked on the lunar soil and exclaimed,
"Beautiful view, magnificent desolation."
What NASA didn't know was that brother Buzz Aldrin had brought a little Masonic flag with him, and by landing on the moon, he had just founded the first extraterrestrial lodge. This new lodge is called Tranquility Lodge number 2000. Brother Buzz Aldrin is a member of a Texas lodge, and for nearly 50 years in Texas, Tranquility Lodge has been waiting for the next day when it will be able to meet on the moon. I have traveled from west to east. I was privileged to be welcomed everywhere, and I never came up against closed doors. In 3 centuries, Masonry has not evolved uniformly, It was sometimes an ornament of society. It was frequently persecuted. It has been enriched by all cultures and all traditions. Despite the distances, the Masons I met surprisingly express a common vision and, above all, a profound attachment to their land, their identity, and their nation. I know that the lodges are composed by men who, by nature, could have made mistakes. But Masonry cannot be an undertaking of mystification or excessive esotericism. It's an egalitarian place of elevation. Masonry is a microcosm of society. The lodge represents the universe, and each man represents a world. Its ultimate aim is to get these worlds to coexist and meet together. Humanity is reflected there as a result of its special, universal symbolism. The world is changing, for good or for bad. Freemasonry will therefore exist for this reason. It represents a humane alternative where respect for the other, respect for the traveler, for ever sacred life, glistens softly.
This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. O hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song